Starting. All right, it says we're broadcasting. We're live. So hi, everybody who's watching. I'm Zeke Sikelianos, and this is Julian Gruber, and we're just making a quick video to talk about LevelDB. I've been watching Julian on GitHub for a while and seen that he's kind of an expert in the topic, and I've been kind of jealous that other people are doing cool things with LevelDB, and I hardly know what it is. So I've corralled Julian to talk a little bit about what LevelDB is, how to use it, and what it's best for. So just to kick it off, can you kind of give a summary of what LevelDB is and where it came from?
Sure. So LevelDB is a key value store implemented as a C library. And so it's not a database itself, but its design is very useful for making it into one, especially used together with Node.js. So LevelDB is used in Google Chrome. That's, I think, where it started. So if you're using IndexedDB, I think, or WebSQL, some of the Chrome web databases, that's using LevelDB under the hood. So LevelDB itself, as I said, is a library. It's not a database that you start and connect to, but it's one that you start in your own process. And then you can do with it whatever you want. For example, you can write a full database layer on top of it, or you can use it in your command line application, for example, as the storage. And that's very useful, for example, when you have a Node module, or when you have a desktop application using Electron, for example, and it needs to do some database operations. You don't want the user to have to install Postgres or Redis or something. So it's very useful that you can just embed it in your process.
Okay, so is it primarily useful for applications that are not running in the browser, or does it also work in the browser?
So funny thing is, although Chrome is running LevelDB under the hood, it's not exposing it. What is interesting however, about LevelDB is the way we use it in Node.js, and we designed it in a way that there's one interface, like one database interface. So you can call db.get, db.put, but you can put multiple storage layers underneath that interface. So you can use that interface, which we call level up, with level down, which itself is LevelDB, but you can also use it with a backend that uses a web browser technology, for example. In this way, you can also use it in the front end. And various people have done have created various backends. For example, there's a Dynamo down, which uses DynamoDB from Amazon Web Services as the backend. And various backends have various specific properties, but we have one common interface for all of them. So for example,
essentially there's, go ahead.
Let me tell you one nice thing about this. Since I said LevelDB itself is only the storage layer, the key value store, in order to make it more usable for different applications, for example, when you want to store a graph data structure in it, or when you want to extend this functionality, you can write a Node module that accepts a level up instance. And this module will work in the browser when you pass it a IndexedDB-based backed LevelDB instance, but it will also work untouched on the server when you pass it a LevelDB backed instance.
Very nice. So are you seeing this as a practical way for means for code sharing between server applications and browser applications?
That could be one aspect, for example, yeah. And that's how we have also used it in different projects.
So you mentioned level up. And one thing that I noticed when looking at the level org is that there are a lot of modules and it's not exactly clear which one I need. And I think if I npm install level, that seems to be the sort of high level so to speak, module that encompasses both level up and level down.
Yes.
So for most consumers, is level the package that we're looking for?
Yeah. I agree that it's a bit confusing to get started. And since after you asked me about it, I configured featured repos in the level organization. So now it should be a bit more easy to get started. But yeah, so level is exactly that. It packages level up and level down like this, level up and level down.
Mm-hmm.
There's, for example, level mem, which packages level up with mem down, which is a pure in-memory storage backend. And you can package level up with any backend that you want to, but we do have convenience packages like level, as you mentioned, that make it easy and quick to get started. So yeah, if you're working with backend, if you're working on the server and Electron, you most of the time will install level to get everything you need.
So let's imagine a scenario where I was using mem down and I'm creating a LevelDB in memory. What would be advantageous about doing that over just kind of storing all my data in a JavaScript object?
Mm-hmm. It's more than just storing it in an object, but in the end, it's storing everything in JavaScript objects. One thing, for example, that LevelDB backends implement is snapshots. That means when you iterate over your data, that means when you create a read stream and listen for data events, from the time of the snapshot being created to the time of the snapshot being disposed, you won't get new updates to the data store. That means you get a consistent view when you create a snapshot or a stream. And that is something I'm sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I think Memdown is implementing exactly that. It might implement more guarantees, but yeah, that's one part of the LevelDB specification as we use it in Level Up.
I see. So on that note also, if I imagine having one LevelDB system and I'm just using level, and I have two different processes that are trying to write data to this database, will it, or to this data store, will it automatically will it avoid race conditions, or how does it work in that way?
Okay, so LevelDB itself is designed as a single process library. That means it does create a folder on your disk where it stores all the data, but only one LevelDB instance can point to it. However, that is the exciting part for us in Node.js, is we can create an abstraction, a library that enables you to talk to one LevelDB from multiple processes. And that is exactly a library that I created. It's called multilevel, and it exposes the same interface as Level Up, even if the real database lives in a different process. And it's also transport agnostic. That means it doesn't care whether you're connecting to a LevelDB from a different node process over TCP, or whether you connect to a LevelDB on the server from a browser using WebSockets, for example, or whether you connect from one DB in a browser tab to whether you connect to a DB running in a browser tab from a different browser tab. So all the situations you could think of where there's a LevelDB living in a different context, you can connect to it.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. So one of the things that I noticed right away when I started using LevelDB is that I tried to save a JSON value, and I noticed that it was essentially stringified into a string that said object.
Yeah.
So does that mean that as a consumer of LevelDB that it's just taken for granted that you are always, if you're saving JSON, that you are stringifying it on the way in and parsing it on the way out?
Yeah, you're right in the observation that LevelDB itself only knows strings or buffers. And we made that easy to work with in Level Up by having encoding options. That means when you create a LevelDB in using level up or level, you can pass an option saying value encoding equals JSON. That means all the values you put into it will be JSON.stringified, and all the values you read out of it will be JSON.parsed. And you can configure this either for keys and values together, or for just the key, or for just the value. And you can even pass your custom encoding function. For example, there's an encoding called bitewise, which sorts well instead, which JSON doesn't. And another concept that I need to mention here about LevelDB is that the keys are sorted lexicographically. That means not only can you retrieve a value based on its key, but when you iterate over the value, it's sorted. That means if you have post A and post B, post A will always come before post B. Sometimes you have a lot of requirements for sorting. And for example, bitewise makes it in a way that you can use an array for the key, and it will be sorted properly. Yeah, so there's a lot to explore in this space, which means especially for specialized users of LevelDB, you can create very efficient indexing and lookup mechanisms by designing the key in the way you're going to look it up.
Got it. Yeah, so that's like a whole thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So obviously I should have just read the docs to see that I could have set the type to JSON there. That would have been easy, but sometimes developers don't like to read docs. I think I read somewhere that, let me pull it up. Keys themselves can be objects. Is that correct?
If you use the JSON encoding, for example, you can also store a object as key. If that does make sense for you or not is a different issue. But say you do have a data structure that serializes and you want to address your content by that data structure, then you can.
Yeah.
But so that's also something you can obviously do in different databases. Like in MySQL, your primary key could also be a string, and you JSON stringify an object into it. But we make it a first-class primitive using composite keys or more complex keys. Right.
So when doing a get operation on a LevelDB, the query can be a string, but it can also be a regular expression, correct?
It can't. No, that doesn't work out the box. I think you could do a full scan of the database and apply a regular expression, but there are a couple modules in LevelDB user space implementing search, and one of them might be regular expression based. That's also something interesting about LevelDB, is that if your database doesn't do what you need out of it, you can make it do it by either using or writing a node module that talks to it in the proper way. And a lot of people have done this, actually.
Do you find that the level organization on GitHub is the most reliable place to find these modules, or are they scattered across all of NPM userland?
I think most are scattered across NPM and userland. What we do have in the level organization are maybe the modules that you only need to write once, for example. And that can only be written in one way, really. But yeah, if you want to look for LevelDB modules, you either use NPM with the search or use GitHub search. GitHub search can be very useful for that because most package names for LevelDB are prefixed by level dash. That makes it easy to search. But also we do have an awesome page. So if you go to github.com/level/awesome, that should give you an interesting list. And we do have a wiki in the level up repo, but I don't know if that's maintained. Yeah, but the awesome list, which I also pinned to the top of the level organization, should be useful.
Okay, awesome. Literally. Thank you for doing that. So I saw that you organized the pinned repos on the organization, and I was like, before, or did he actually add this after I requested it? So
I was sneaky.
Losing my mind there. So thinking selfishly about what I would want to use LevelDB for,
Mm-hmm.
it would mostly be taking extracts of the NPM registry, setting them up into different things. So one could be like working on the Electron team, for example. We have a package called Electron NPM packages. And essentially, all it does is streams the entire NPM registry and looks for modules that either have Electron in the title or the description or in the keywords or they depend on Electron. And for these kinds of projects, I've just been using the file system as the storage medium and using a Git repository. But as the NPM registry has grown and we now have over 600,000 modules in the registry, this approach doesn't scale. Storing 600,000 JSON files on disk is no longer practical. So let's say if I were to create a LevelDB and I wanted it to be like a searchable NPM registry. So if I were to stream down the database from the replicate.npm.js and just start piping data into my brand new LevelDB, would the key design be my only way of kind of making the database searchable?
The key design determines how you can look up your data, and search fundamentally is about the right way of looking up something. So I would say yes, either you design the keys properly from the beginning, or you would run additional like full scans to re-index the data and create additional values. For example, what people a lot of the time do is you have an ID per record, and under that ID you store the full value of the JSON blob. And then you create more keys that just point to the ID. And those additional keys will help with the lookup. So for example, you could have, well, you could do tag and then exclamation mark and then the value of the tag, for example, so that you can also look up by tag. And there's one module, I think, implementing that, especially for JSON. So for every JSON blob you put in there, it will also index by the key.
Okay, great. So then when you say you're storing each unique key with another record, are you then one to kind of search for the ID and then another to that specific record?
Sorry, you were
or
dropping
is there
out.
okay to put it another way?
Mm-hmm.
Can two keys refer to the same value?
Yeah. In LevelDB, there is always a pair of a key and a value. And so the key doesn't refer to the value, it's a pair. That means if you want two keys to refer to the same value, you will have to do two lookups. However, those shouldn't be taking too much time if the value of the key you're using for lookup is small, which it should be since it's only the ID of the real record.
So say I store Express in the database, and the key name is Express, and the value is a package object that has keywords, dependencies, all these other things. Searchable and I wanted to be able to search for something like server and have Express show up, would I then have a key like keyword server is Express?
Yeah, so you could either do that, or I also just thought, I forgot that if space isn't your constraint, you can always store the full Express package info every time instead of referring to its ID. But yeah, you would either, or there's a third thing you can do, and that would be, so in a search, for example, on a search page, you don't need to know all the information about the package, but you might only need to know the name and the description. So in your lookup key, which could be a server, you could store Express as its name and its description and its ID, and then you can use that to output your information on the command line. But you could also refer to the whole blob by doing another get operation if you need additional information.
Okay, this is very exciting. I'm going to have to do this.
Nice.
Okay. So another thing that I came across, so does LevelDB have a concept of timestamps? Or I'm assuming the answer is no. And if so, what is the best practice for kind of incorporating timestamps into your data?
They do have a node module called level timestamps. And because I've had this before, there are some considerations though with timestamps. So if you create your record, it's easy to store the creation time and the modification time of the creation. If you update your record, it could be, you might need to do a lookup first. I don't remember actually the implementation, but yeah, you should check out this module level timestamps and see if it works for you. And that would be also a good place to discuss this kind of functionality in the issues of that repository.
Okay, great. So with a lot of these level modules, is there, so going back to Express as a kind of well-known, know about, Express has this concept of connect middleware, and all of the middleware adheres to a certain kind of pattern where it's a function that has a certain set of arguments. Do LevelDB plugins, if that's what we want to call them, is there a kind of a LevelDB pattern that is followed by a lot of these modules?
There isn't a pattern that is as strongly developed as Connect, definitely. We tried creating a middleware interface, but there is a lot more flexibility necessary in such an interface than for an HTTP middleware interface. There are, however, a bunch of patterns that are commonly used. One would be to wrap the database and, for example, override the put method, which has drawbacks, obviously. Another would be to listen for events on LevelDB. It emits put and batch events, for example. Another would be to create a completely new interface, but then you lose the ability for that to be consumed by a different module again. Yeah, but the most used approach, I would say, is wrapping or extending a LevelDB object in a way that it can also be extended by the next module that you don't know about yet. But yeah, we don't have something as nice as the middleware layer.
So can you think of any modules offhand that are kind of good citizens in this regard, that are following a pattern that is...
Let me think. I haven't used level modules myself in a while. I do know, for example, that multi-level, the RPC mechanism, exposes almost the exact same API, but there are some ways where it doesn't work. I don't know from the top of my head, really.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Here, how do I empty my database? I just delete the directory?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I figured.
DevOps made
Just wanted to
easy.
be sure. Right. What else do I have here? Oh, okay. So one of the things that I quickly kind of started working with Level, a CLI or a REPL, just a way to kind of interact with my database on the command line. So I found one that's called LevelDB REPL, very clever name. Is that kind of, do you use that or do you use others?
I think the REPL that I've used most is called Lev by Paulo, by Hijinks, or 0x00a.
Yeah.
And I think there are a couple alternatives. Matthias Macintosh also has one. Dominic, I'm pretty sure, has one. Dominic Tar. So I've been lucky enough to work with LevelDB in Electron applications for the last couple of times I've worked with it. And in that case, you just go to the console and inspect the DB object and create a read stream and see what's in there. But yeah, if something isn't working for you, you should definitely ping Paulo, because he made some awesome stuff with Lev. And I think he also has a terminal GUI application for that. But
Oh,
you would have to
okay.
look it up.
All right. Yeah, I'll check that out. So speaking of that, speaking of Electron, someone was recently asking in our Slack channel about best practices for application state and being able to do this from both the main and renderer processes from Electron. And one of the suggestions was, just use this module, which is just basically writes JSON files to disk.
ToiletDB.
But what was it?
There's one called
ToiletDB?
ToiletDB that does that, yeah. And it's called ToiletDB because it has a flush method. Yeah.
Okay.
We use that in that desktop, for example.
Do you use ToiletDB in that?
We use the ToiletDB in the desktop Electron application.
Got it. Okay. And is that what you use to store application state, or do you use it for some other purpose?
Yeah, that's what we use for storing application state. So, for example, the list of, or the array of debts that you are synchronizing, replicating. Yeah.
Okay. And then is Toilet a wrapper around Level, or no?
It's simple file system operations. We could use LevelDB for that. There would be no reason not to use it, I think. But the reason ToiletDB works well for this is because it stores it gives you the whole JSON JavaScript object in memory, and it just stores to disk after you changed it, modified it. But maybe you would use something that Sindre, so I don't know how to pronounce his name, released. Yeah. I think he made a module where you call .get and .set for storing configuration and state. But you could definitely use LevelDB for that, yes.
Okay, and are you using it in both main and renderer processes, or are you using inter-process communication to?
We almost use no IPC there, so yeah, it would be used in both sides, yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll have to share that with. This was someone on the Visual Studio Code team who was trying to improve the performance of their of that piece.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's actually all the notes that I had.
I think I remember one note that we didn't go over. That would be a promises or an async interface.
Oh yeah, yes.
And that's something we released with level up or level 2. So every method that takes a callback, if you don't pass the callback, it will return a promise. So it does work with async await. We still expose the Node.js core streams, but there are a couple promise helpers for working with streams with async await. But yeah, in the userland modules, it might look differently, but level core does support promises everywhere.
Okay, great. So then if I use a userland module, it's kind of like my mileage may vary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And we did
As
talk
always.
about this a lot, but it's it has so vast community implications, whichever step or direction you take. So if you have, say, blessed modules, for example, that is somewhat discriminatory against userland progress. So we are very cautious not to also have too much modules in the level organization. Like we want the full distributed collaboration, but that also means it can be a bit more, can diverge, for example. Yeah. So
Right.
it's not it's not like using Rails and adding a gem and it will just work with whatever system or something you're using. It's more of a hands-on approach to databases. Definitely.
So what are you doing with Level right now? Are you just maintaining it? Are you building things with it?
So we're using it in Voltra a lot, and Voltra is a music player as an Electron app, and it's using LevelDB for all its storage, basically. So imagine having something like iTunes, but it's using LevelDB for all storage needs.
For metadata or for files as well?
For metadata. You wouldn't necessarily have to store files in Level, but if you want to do that, I created a module called Level Storage, which lets you, for example, pipe a file into LevelDB. So because LevelDB is a key value store, you can't pipe into a value. But what it does under the hood is it creates a value for each chunk of your file, and then again exposes it as one stream when you read out of it. But in general, I would say for storing files, just use the file system. It's only when you're using a lot of key value pairs that would overload the file system, for example, like all the metadata. Then it's better to use LevelDB.
Right. Okay, so you're using it in Voltra.
Yeah, that's also a question people often have. Like, if LevelDB is just writing to disk, why don't I just store files in disk? And if you look at Git, for example, at Git's implementation, you see you need to go a few extra steps if you want to use just the file system. Like, you shouldn't have too many files in a folder, otherwise it will get slow. And if you read from or write to too many files concurrently, you might run out of open file descriptors.
Right.
And so LevelDB will not run into this issue. Yeah. So that's why you can't just use the file system instead of LevelDB if you have more specific needs for your storage layer.
Yeah, so I just discovered this recently when I started with a directory full of 600,000 JSON files, and when I ran the disk utility on it, it was about 2 gigabytes. And then I stuffed it all into a LevelDB, and it's 80 megabytes. So there must be some very impressive compression built into LevelDB then.
I think compression, as well as maybe the way it's indexed. I mean, I don't know in detail how the file system is implemented, but for example, what I want to say about Git, what Git is doing is, like, if you have a bunch of keys for your objects, it will create a folder for each 2-character prefix in a key. So this way, instead of storing 100,000 files in one directory, we'll store them, I don't know, in many directories.
Sure.
So it doesn't get too slow on disk.
So I'm assuming that keys are case sensitive. in LevelDB? Okay, that's great, because I ran into a very confusing issue where I was streaming from the registry, saving files to disk, and discovered that there are numerous mixed case packages, over 3,000 mixed case packages in the registry.
Yeah.
Some of which have an identical name to the lowercase equivalent.
Yeah, it used to be allowed in NPM to have case-sensitive packages. Now it's not anymore. But for example, there's a JSON stream package by Dominic Tarr, which is uppercase JSON and then stream. And I think there's a lowercase JSON stream. And yeah, they are not the same package. But
yeah, I actually just created a repository to try to find all of the the overlapping names, and it's kind of scary. There's one for React, there's one for Express, there's quite a few. Yeah. So
it's good to have
hopefully,
this done.
Yeah, hopefully at some point NPM will lock that down a little bit more, or maybe remove all of the fake like typo squatting packages there.
Yeah, I think they're working on that actively, actually, as we speak.
Yeah, I was working at NPM at the time where we decided to disallow the uppercase names.
Okay. Okay, I see.
So just to ask one more thing, how do you feel about the state of the Level ecosystem? Do you feel like the community is in good shape, and also do you feel like the project in general is healthy and going in the right direction?
I might have answered this differently a year ago, but the way I see LevelDB now is that the core is extremely stable. And if you use it for focused tasks like for your CLI where you're storing node modules or indexing them, it will be very in a healthy state for doing that. And we are focused a lot on stability and just analyzing cases where it might run out of memory, for example. In userland, there will be, I guess, there might be a lot of instability, especially since we released level 2, which modified the interface, which was a breaking change. Yeah, so I would say if you're looking at LevelDB and you would say you would need a lot of userland modules to achieve your task, you might need to do a lot of extra work and wouldn't consider the ecosystem healthy then. But if you're working mostly with the core, then it's in a very good state, I would say. And also the LevelDB community is very helpful. So for example, if you create an issue on the Level Up repository, and if you just have a question, for example, we won't say this is for bugs only. Like, we are always happy to discuss that in this place and to discuss crazy ideas, crazy suggestions people have. That's always fun to work on. Yeah, but in general, I would say activity has slowed down a bit, but that is because we've made it do one thing and do it well. And eventually the goal with that approach is that you don't have to touch it anymore, like the core Unix utilities, for example.
That's great. So can you quickly summarize what the breaking changes were in level 2?
We removed some methods that were deprecated before, methods that you wouldn't need to use often. And we added the promise interface, which was a breaking change, because before, if you didn't pass a callback, we would emit success and error events. But now if you don't pass a callback, it returns a promise, which is different in flow control. And also we changed the way you instantiate a LevelDB. It used to be like the level interface didn't change, but if you want to combine this part with that part, that interface changed. So now you call level up, level down location. So level down is an argument to level up. Before that, it would be more complex to set things up and less flexible.
Got it.
Yeah,
I see.
So, but even that is tiny breaking changes, I think. It's not like you need to relearn it. It's just a small part of the interface that changed. And I think that points to the maturity of the project.
Yeah, that's great. So did you also, I noticed there was some conversation around using pre-build for the native compilation aspect of it. Is that, where did you end up with that?
Mm-hmm. We're using pre-build for that. That means when you install LevelDB, it doesn't need to compile it from source unless you live on some exotic platform. That also means if you use it for Electron and you install it, and then you say, hey, rebuild this for Electron, as you do usually with Electron native modules, then it will just download the Electron build instead of recompiling it for Electron. And we automated all that in the CI environment. So that means every push to level master will create the pre-built assets for the next release.
Okay, so the precompiled assets don't live in the module themselves. They're on S3 or something?
They're in the GitHub releases.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we've covered quite a bit here. I'm definitely going to go back through and make a list of links and some notes based on all the things we talked about here.
Awesome.
But let's call it here. I'm going to stop the broadcast.